you so much for joining us here for this panel that we have entitled Getting Your Dreamcast, Unboxing the Interactive Agreements from SAG-AFTRA. My name is Crispin Freeman. I'm a voice actor. I've been voice acting since 1997 in video games and animation and anime. I've worked on a lot of Blizzard titles recently, Overwatch, Diablo 3, World of Warcraft. And I'm joined with some wonderful people here on the panel to help me with this presentation, and I will allow them to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Sikkema. I am the business representative at SAG-AFTRA who handles our video game contracts.
I'm Elmaleh. I'm a game voice actor, known primarily for indies, actually. Games like Gone Home and Where the Water Tastes Like Wine and Pyre and Galaxy, etc. So I care very much about this topic of getting to be part of the union and also getting to work with some of my favorite developers in the indie space.
I'm Cissy Jones. I'm also a voice actress. I've kind of built my career on complicated indie figures from The Walking Dead to Firewatch to Where the Water Tastes Like Wine and Life is Strange, and I love working on indie games. So I'm also very invested in making this union happen.
As you can probably tell, each of us has a lot of investment in indie games. I was actually on the negotiating committee for the latest union video game contract, and it was very important to me to make sure that we came up with a version of the contract that would work with independent developers. And so for many moons, many months, we consulted with independent developers about what they would need in a contract. How could we modify the union contract to serve their needs? And so what we're going to be sharing with you today is the result of the consultation with all of those developers. And we've been allowed to name drop some of them, Sarah.
I'm just going to do it because I'm classless. But yes, Rami Ismail in particular stayed with the contract in its various revisions as we collected feedback and were able to make changes in collaboration with staff. But other folks we talked to, and this is not an endorsement from them, but we did very seriously consider, I made sure that we all very seriously considered their input. People like Davey Reedon and Zoe Quinn, Nels Anderson, Sam, our own indicates Sam Roberts, Darren Korb, Sean Vanneman, Jonathan Blow, Mike Bithell, Aaron Isaacson, Nick Sutner, who used to be at Sony, and Chris Brown, voice director Chris Brown. So I'm very proud that we were able to use what they had to say and sort of incorporate their perspectives and their needs into this final version that we have now.
Yeah. So what you have in front of you are 3 actors who are eager to work as ambassadors between the union and independent developers to help with whatever questions or liaisoning in any way that we can. And one of our lovely staff members, in fact 2, there's a second one here as well, who are here to answer all of the nitty-gritty questions you might have about the contract. They do the nuts and bolts. We're here to make sure that you understand how much we want to work with all of you. We want to work with you on your storytelling. So this presentation is going to be basically in 3 parts. The first is what union performers can offer you. The second will be why it's easier than ever to work with union performers. And the third is exactly how you can get union performers in your game. So let's start with the first of that, what union performers can offer you. Now, the most obvious and sort of straightforward thing that the union can offer you is casting choices. If you decide to work with union talent, you are working with one of the largest pools of talent in the world. And this can be especially important if you're dealing with difficult casting challenges. If you're looking for people of color or you're looking for diversity in your cast, the union can give that to you. And in fact, that was a very big consideration on a certain game you might be familiar with called Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. And I thought I'd hand this over to Sarah to talk a little bit more about the process and the casting that went into Where the Water Tastes Like Wine.
So I had worked with Janneman, who's actually here with us today. Thank you for coming, Janneman.
Hi, Janneman.
Janneman Nordhagen. I'm saying that right? Janneman.
As far as I know.
As far as you know. On a game called Gone Home. And then when Janneman and I stayed in touch and were talking about his next project called Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, after parting with Fulbright, he cared a lot about the idea of having voiceover, even though he knew it was sort of a feature that he would need to get some extra funding for, but he found a collaborative, a positive working relationship with a publisher called Good Shepherd. which gave him that opportunity to add voices into the game. And we were just sort of in touch as he was talking about casting and listening for quality of performances for some very unique roles, really, really special characters that you don't necessarily get to see in games. You know, people of color, people, older characters. The game, if you aren't familiar, is a storytelling game where you hear perspectives from across kind of American history, and there's actually happens to be a strong labor message throughout. But we were talking about how to cast some of these more challenging roles, and I started naming actors rather that I love, actors that I respect, and that came to mind for me. And as we were talking, he got more excited and was like, "Could we have them?" And I was like, "You can ask. We have this contract that means you can at least ask them." And I think we have a trailer actually with some of those.
Yes, we thought we'd share with you a little bit of the sound of the game and the wonderful cast that they were able to pull together.
Yes, this country is built from stories, pieces passed along and grown into the foundation of this land.
The law? I can get by with the law.
I seen terrible things too. Biblical floods and starving folks.
Look in a man's eye when they're aiming to kill you. It's as sharp as a gunshot.
You ever wake up already silently screaming in your head? Have you ever begged for 10 cents?
We've got a right to live. And if the bank people and the rich men won't let us, whose fault is it if we snap?
After all, this land was made by you and me, telling each other who we are, over and over again.
If you don't recognize some of those names just by name alone, I mean, Dave Fennoy and Melissa Hutchison and Cissy are all in Walking Dead, incredible, and I think now classic performances from that game. Kimberly Brooks and Keith Farley are in Mass Effect, performances I loved. Arif Kinchin is not in this trailer, but in Saints Row. There were a couple other, I think, Latina voice actors in particular that my agency was just able to supply because they have this roster of talent on hand. It was just a joy, really, really special for me to make some of these connections and suggestions because, as you can see, the project has these incredible opportunities for actors, just these unusual, surprising, nuanced characters and voices. And so actors were, thrilled to get the opportunity to work on such a game, and obviously Yannaman was really excited to have their performances kind of lift the characters into this extra vivid kind of place to connect with players. And then, the fact that there's a labor message in the game too is nice. I think we have a statement from Yannaman actually.
We do. It may be a little odd to quote the man while he's
here.
But if he'll indulge us, he did give us a wonderful little blurb. He said, working with SAG-AFTRA on Where the Water Tastes Like Wine was a wonderful experience. It was very important to us to work with union actors because of the themes of the game and our personal belief that unions make us all stronger. The folks at SAG-AFTRA made the whole process incredibly painless on their end, and we had access to so much world-class talent because of the experience. In addition, the new low-budget agreement put all of this within reach for an indie game. I can't recommend it highly enough. Hopefully I'll get to play Yannaman in the film version.
You're dead rare.
I get approval from the man himself. Good. Excellent. So yes, casting choices, right? But there's many other aspects to the union you may not be aware of. There's certain advantages you can have by working with union talent. One is experience. Union talent tends to be far more seasoned and experienced, which means that they're much more hard to rattle. They're used to working under a variety of different working conditions, as I imagine Cissy can attest to.
Truth.
Thank you. And so they understand. They can keep their equilibrium under all sorts of different circumstances, and it takes a lot to throw seasoned union actors. Also, they tend to get through their lines quicker as a result. There isn't as much sort of hunting around for a performance. they're usually very good at taking direction, and they have an idea of where you're going for, and so stuff can get done more efficiently, which is good both in terms of time, but also in terms of freshness. You don't want to be in a recording situation trying to do something creative, and you're on take 10 or 20 of trying to get what you want. Like, it's so much better to feel like you're in a rhythm, and you're going, and you're getting it done, and everybody is sort of in a better place because of that. You don't want to be messing around. Union actors will also bring you flexibility. Union talents are used to coming up with many different voices, many times on the fly, to suit the character needs of the situation. In fact, it's baked into our contracts. Whether we're working on animation or games or whatever, there's a certain number of characters that we are expected to be able to produce during that one session. And those numbers vary depending on the situation, but we never come in just one voice, right? We're supposed to come in and have a variety of voices available, which means that most union actors have like a roster of characters in their back pocket that they're ready to pull out at a moment's notice and sort of tailor to whatever they need to. So there's incredible flexibility usually with union talent. Availability. These are actors who have decided to make this their vocation, right? This is their occupation. And they understand that they need to have their schedule to be open and flexible so that they can be available for whatever studio recording session they need to do. So this isn't something they're squeezing in around something else that they're doing. This is something that they're committed to, both professionally, psychologically, emotionally. They understand the importance of, we got to get this session done. In fact, there was an old-time voiceover guy. They asked him what his secret to success was, and he says, "When they call, I come." That's basically what he does, right? When they call, I come. Reliability. Union talent can provide you with consistent performances, even when those recording sessions are months, sometimes 6 months apart. Again, Cissy can attest to this, right?
Can confirm.
I was working on a game franchise where we would record once every 6 months for years, literally. And I would have 3, 4, 5 different characters in the game that I was expected to play and be able to pull them out and do them. Now, oftentimes, we may remember the voices off the top of our heads. It is often helpful to have a little sample of the character.
Please
right?
save a little voice print.
A little voice sample is
Preferably
good.
a take you liked.
But all we need is that little voice sample. We're like, oh, who is that character again? You play a little voice sample, we go, oh, yes, I remember that character. Got it, let's go. And it's like you were recording 6 months ago, right? There's just consistency to what you're doing. Union performers tend to know their instrument. They know exactly where they need to put things. The last thing that union performers can give you is a little harder to quantify, but it's this notion of authority. You wouldn't get just anybody to do the artwork in your game. And yet often I will hear indie developers or different people even in other aspects of the industry saying, oh, we'll just get our friends to do the voices. Right? I mean, sure, you can, but the challenge is, in a marketplace where you're competing for eyeballs, and people are used to things sounding professional, whatever that might mean, there's a certain emotional comfort and release the audience has when they can feel the authority, right? They can feel the authority in the game work, in the artwork. They can feel the authority in the game mechanics, and they can feel the authority in the performances. And it's hard to just play at that, right? When you've got those actors, you can have those sort of authoritative performances that let something in your audience or in your gamers go, yeah, that's it, that's the real deal. And sure enough, that was certainly the case in a little game you may be familiar with called Firewatch. And I thought what I'd do now is I'd hand it over to Cissy, who can tell us a little bit about the casting process and the development process for Firewatch.
So I had worked on The Walking Dead with Sean Bannerman and Jake Rodkin, and it was my first job as a voice actor, and went on to do 5 characters in the first season and the DLC, and then ultimately 9 in the entire series. But after series 1 wrapped, Sean and I had met, and he called me and said, you know, I've left Telltale, started a new company called Campo Santo, writing a new game, female protagonist. You in? And I said, huh? And I did a test run for him so that he could get the buy-off from the whole team. And then they went on the search for their Henry. It took them a while. They did a ton of auditions. They went through a ton of different guys from different agencies. And ultimately, through a random Twitter conversation, they ended up chatting with Rich Sommer, who was Harry Crane in Mad Men, and a bunch of other things that I later learned. And we started recording, and we recorded for about 2 years. Every 6 months, like Crispin was saying, we would have 1 or 2 sessions a week, and then it would be another 6 months, and then we'd have 4 or 5 sessions in a week, and then it would be 3 months, and pickups, and on you go. And the great thing about it was that Sean had us both record from our separate home studios. So at the same time, we would Skype in together and record it as an actual conversation, which is so rare in games. It's usually recorded in a vacuum, and I'm making up reactions that may or may not exist. But we got to do that, and it was lovely, and it was the greatest experience as an actor to be able to do, and it was great.
I would add to that there's a perception of voiceover in general being expensive, which I hope to disprove today, but also that recording ensemble, which means recording together, which produces vastly more naturalistic and believable and interesting results, is expensive, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, especially professional voice actors have their home setups. Skype is free, and then suddenly you're doing this right, and you're getting really, really believable, honest reactions to each other.
The other thing I would add to that is that I, as a professional voice talent, was a little nervous when they got a celebrity to be part of it, because, I mean, listen, celebrities are fine and all, but come on. Rich was phenomenal.
Yeah, he's so
and
good. He's so good.
And he desperately wanted to be in this game. He wanted to help make this character come to life, and we both were invested in making this game special.
So I thought I'd share a little clip of the brilliance of the two of them. This is at the very beginning of the game. The character of Henry, played by Rich, has hiked for 2 days through the mountains to get to that lookout tower so that he can look out and make sure that there aren't any fires that start in the forests. And when he gets there, he gets a radio call from Delilah, the woman who's played by Cissy, and is sort of his supervisor. And it's going to be basically the two of them through the game. So here's a little clip of the two of them.
Hello, Two Forks Tower.
Hello? Whoever this is?
It's Henry, right?
Yeah.
I'm Delilah.
Yeah, that's what the guy said on the phone.
So, what's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
People take this job to get away from something. So, what's wrong?
What's wrong with you?
That's a great idea. Go ahead.
Look, I just hiked for 2 days, so I don't really follow whatever it is you're doing right now.
You take a stab at what's wrong with me.
Fine, then can I sleep forever?
Sure, buddy. Okay, now go ahead.
Okay, you've killed 3 husbands. You're a black widow and you're just out here until the heat dies down and then you'll kill again.
Ooh, very good. Bravo, Henry.
Okay, I sleep now?
Not quite. Now you.
Okay, good night, bye.
Let's see. I don't know anything about you, but 9 times out of 10, folks out here simply got dumped.
Huh, is that it?
Close?
Good night.
Good night. Welcome to the job.
I don't know if you can tell, I don't know if you've ever tried your hand at voice acting. But to take those words off the page and have that very, what we would call sort of natural human reactions and whatnot, not easy, right? Not easy to do in an isolation booth. But the two of them did it so well that Cissy actually won a BAFTA award for her performance in the game. So congratulations. Now
It's almost not as embarrassing, Cissy.
thoroughly embarrassed Cissy.
Yeah.
Now, both these games that we've shown you clearly rely on storytelling and narrative very heavily in order for the game to work. I mean, throughout Firewatch, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically Henry and Delilah the entire time. But this notion of having authoritative voices in your game can apply even in games that don't seem on the surface to require that kind of authority. And Sarah has a story to tell about a little game called XUPON.
XUPON, which just came out this summer. And XUPON is by a developer called SAG-AFTRA, and their whole brand is very crunchy, puzzle games, programming puzzle games specifically. So this is a game where you learn a not real programming language, but you basically learn a programming language and then solve hackery puzzles with them. So the focus isn't necessarily on the story, but they did want to add characters. They did want to have, just for atmosphere and to kind of enjoy, they've got this very goofy, fun 90s hacker setting, which I think Matthew will talk about in he gave us a testimonial.
Yes.
So they did want to have characters as part of the setting, just as an added way to enjoy, and also just to experience the puzzles, being hackery and whatnot. So yeah, I'll just set up. I think we have a trailer and the statement.
Yes.
Because Matthew had this described kind of how he thought about voiceover in the context of this being not a very story-heavy game.
Yeah, Matthew Burns, who was working on the game as well, talked to Zach of SAGTronics, and he said that Zach and I agreed for XUPON we'd either do voices right or not at all. So we took some time to research it, determine costs, etc., and decided to go ahead with it. We knew that having voice lines in a puzzle programming game wasn't some kind of must-have feature that was going to get more people to buy it, but we did want to put more focus on characters and world building than we had in the past. So getting performances was one way we accomplished that. Ultimately, I think they work well. They add flavor and depth to the game's fun 90s hacker setting. We try to stretch our boundaries every time we make a game, and this was one of the ways we did that for XUPON.
Yeah, so Matthew is their writer, and he had also spent a lot of time as an audio producer at Bungie, which I think gave him an advantage in understanding, having touched or been sort of aware peripherally of the voice casting and recording process. So we actually have a trailer, which I'll set up. So Matthew and I were talking a little bit. I knew that he kind of wanted to go this route, and then I didn't hear anything about it for a while. But what it turns out he had done was he had approached one of my favorite casting directors and voice directors in games, Chris Brown. He did it with this by pitching this particular project and all the things that he cares about, and they kind of resonated with each other, and she decided she wanted to work on the project. And so there were, even in this game, a couple of characters that they really had to nail. The character that you're going to meet in a second is non-binary, for example, and it's an actor named Emma Galvin out of New York who does a really beautiful job. So Matthew kind of walked through this process exactly how I would have suggested him to do it, which was to hire a great voice director, casting director, to tap into rosters of talent and to get, even for just a small handful of characters that you interact with at various points in the game, to really cast them right and get them recorded right. So here's the trailer.
The setup of the game is it's in the 90s, you are a hacker, and there's an illness called the phage. And basically, the phage takes parts of your body and turns it into technology, otherwise known as junk. So you're slowly turning robotic. And part of your challenge is you're trying to find some sort of medicine that can fight the phage and put you back to being human. So there's a courier called Nevos, and the courier comes, and it turns out the courier actually might have an inside track on how to get medicine for the phage.
You are going to hack yourself, though, later, when medicine isn't enough.
Oh, the sound didn't come up. Come on, sound, you can do it.
Here we go.
Hey, can you hear me? I heard you were looking for some medicine for the phage. Looks like you definitely need it. So, I do have a source. I know where to get it. It's cheaper than the real deal, but it's still gonna be pricey. The going rate is 700 a dose. You need to take one dose every day. Yeah, that's dollars. Sorry, I don't set the prices. I'm just a courier. It's not like any of that money goes to me. Anyway, if you do get the money, give me a call.
So, after all this, you might be thinking, I get it. I understand what union performers can offer me. Now, what I want to explain to you is why it's easier than ever to work with us. You may be ready to go down the yellow brick road, right? You're marching down the yellow brick road, headed to the doors of the union, and the concern might be that once you get there, you're going to have some bureaucrats yelling at you saying, "Nobody sees the great and powerful Oz." I'm sure there's lots of rumors floating around about how difficult it can be to work with a union. There might be a lot of red tape and forms and bureaucracy and whatnot. I'm here to tell you things have changed. There's all sorts of new staff that want to invite you in and help you with your project, especially when it comes to independent development and the low budget agreement. the SAG-AFTRA staff is eager to work with you. We have a brand new voiceover department which focuses on these kinds of issues. So there's a central place to go to ask questions and whatnot. We have two wonderful representatives here from the voiceover department. In fact, we also have our low-budget contract contact, Katie Sikkema, here on the panel with us.
Yay!
And we have a new online interactive producer's guide that's still a little bit in development, but it's working. And so if you want to see a hard copy version of it, there will be at the table, the SAG-AFTRA table that will be here at the event.
And they are online.
And they are online, yes. So you can check that out online. So before we get into some of the nitty-gritty of that, I want to just go over some of the basic differences between what we call the standard interactive agreement and the new low-budget agreement that we're all very excited about, and I think probably applies to a lot of what you are doing. In the standard interactive agreement, anything over 1.5 million, basically in terms of budget, qualifies under the standard interactive agreement. 1.5 million and below in terms of your budget qualifies you for the low budget interactive agreement. Now, in the standard interactive agreement, we have what are called 4-hour minimums. A recording session can not go longer than 4 hours, and that's what you sort of pay an actor for. Even if you don't necessarily use all 4 hours, you have to pay them for that 4-hour session. We heard clearly that that was not always going to work in the independent world, so now the low budget agreement has a 2-hour minimum for sessions, which gives more flexibility in terms of scheduling. The standard interactive agreement is what's called a collective bargaining agreement. This means that this is negotiated once every 3 years with a bunch of producers and developers, the sort of AAA producers and developers. The terms of that are hashed out, everyone signs to it, and that collective agreement applies for the next 3 years, and anyone who's signed to it, any one of their games has to be done under that collective agreement. That was not going to work in the independent development world, and so what we have for the low budget agreement is a one production only contract. That means that you only have to sign for the one game that you're working on, because we understand that each one of these independent games is going to be very different. It's going to be structured differently, it's going to be distributed differently, it's going to monetize differently, and so there might need to be customizations or tailoring that needs to be done to make sure that it can work with the union and vice versa. And so it doesn't make sense to do this over a long period. Let's just do it one production at a time, and we can make sure that it's working and whatnot, and we can adjust and change things as we go if necessary. The standard interactive agreement has what we call a sort of rigid secondary payment structure. It was hashed out over many hours, and there's a table, and the only way you can change it is if you pay it ahead of time. If you do a buyout ahead of time, it changes the amount you have to pay, but that's basically it. You either pay the table or you pay it ahead of time, boom. With the low budget agreement, much more flexible. We understand there are different ways to monetize your game, and Katie Sikkema and Katie Watson and the other staff in the voiceover department are happy to talk to you about how to make that secondary payment structure work with your game. We want your game to succeed. The goal is not to burden your game with undue payments. That is the last thing any of us want to do. We just have to make sure that things are fair and square. And that means it's got to work for you as well as a developer. It's got to work with your business model and how things are functioning. So there's a lot more flexibility in the low budget agreement. And the Katies are happy to talk to you about any of that. So what I want to do now is sort of hand this over to our Katie Sikkema, who's going to tell us a little more about the nitty-gritties of how you can get union performers in your game, specifically talking about the online interactive producer's guide and giving you sort of a bird's eye view of how it works. So, take it away, Katie.
All right. So, when you've got a game and you think that you might want to use union performers on it, please give me a call. We'll have my information up at the end. And like I said, we'll be at a booth out in the courtyard the next 2 days. You can stop by and chat with me there. I'm also available on email if you hate talking on the phone. But I'd love to get some information about your game, find out what you're doing, what do you need, what's your budget, how many performers do you want to use. When we're ready to move forward, I'll have you fill out a couple of forms, a preliminary information sheet that gives me some basic information on the game. I'll need your company information if you're signing as a company, the forms that you filed with the state that are stamped showing that your company is real and exists, If you don't have a company, that's cool. You can sign as an individual. I'll just need a copy of your driver's license to make sure that you are real and exist. That you're not two Muppets in a trench coat or something. I'll need a copy of your budget to make sure that you qualify for the low budget agreement. And I'll usually also take a look at it and make sure that you've considered all of the performer costs that you need to keep in mind. You know, look at your voice budget. How many performers are you using? Have you appropriately budgeted for that? Have you considered other things like payroll or paying into the performer's health and retirement fund? And then you'll sign the agreements, which is the low budget agreement that signs you to our terms, and an adherence letter for the health and retirement company saying that you agree to pay the performer's health and retirement. Because, you know, I work at SAG-AFTRA, they pay my insurance, but you're not going to get an insurance company for all the performers that you're hiring on your game. They get our insurance through us, you pay into the pension and health fund, that's how they get their insurance.
We earn it a job.
We do.
Yeah.
And
So every little bit counts.
Yes. And then once I've got all of that, I will clear your game to start recording with your performers. I'll send you a zip file with everything that you need for production, your performer contracts, your timesheets, a cast clearance form so you can check the status of your performers, make sure that they are up to date on their dues and good to work. Or maybe you'll find out that someone is actually eligible but not a member yet, or isn't a member yet, in which case I'll give you a Taft-Hartley form to fill out that covers them under our rules. It also gives them their eligibility for a new performer. You'll pay their payroll, you'll pay into their pension and health fund, and we do strongly recommend that you hire a payroll company. I know being a video game developer is enough work. Being a payroll accountant is a lot too, and it's great to have someone to make sure that all of your tax deductions are done correctly and any overtime is accounted for. And then when you're all done, you'll send me a final budget just to make sure that you stayed on track and you know that you still made the qualifications for the low budget agreement. And then, as far as I'm concerned, you're done with me. Yeah.
The pro tip we would share with you is hire a voice director. Sarah was talking about Chris Brown, who we both work with extensively on games, and we love her to death.
Yeah.
Having someone who is the captain of your voice acting ship is very good. They can make sure that there's a unified vision and sound to what you're doing. They also can make sure that they speak actor, so that if there's some idea that you're going for and you're not quite sure how to articulate it, they can find the words for you to help the actor. Also, they tend to have a Rolodex of actors that they can pull at a moment's notice. So if you say, God, we're looking for this character, the director can often say, I know exactly who we need to get for that character. I work with them on this project. Hang on, let me see if they're available. And I've seen that happen on a daily basis in certain things.
How do you start finding a voice director and actors?
I would say if you know of actors that you like their work, it's easier than ever to reach out on Twitter or any of those, and most of us are happy to get back and say, oh yeah, the voice director we worked with was blah blah blah, and we have such a love relationship with the voice directors that we know that we want everybody to work all the time. So we'd be more than happy to share that. If you don't know, you could probably call Katie and ask her, or you could look up in the credits. Sometimes on IMDb
that would be my
it'll show.
recommendation. Listen for performances that you liked and look who directed them and look who performed them, and then find their information and contact that way.
Yeah. I mean, you have to understand, in the world of voiceover, the notion of a celebrity voice actor is almost a contradiction in terms, right? Because we don't, except now that with the internet.
It's changing.
It's changing. It's funny, I got into voice acting, thought I'd be able to stay anonymous, and then the internet happened. Damn it! But the fact of the matter is, we like to work. And we like to work on cool projects. We're not in this for the red carpet, right? We're in this because we like working on interesting projects. So if you're working on an interesting project and you've heard someone's performances that you like, or you can get, because you're doing it union, you can go through the agencies. You can get on the agents' websites and they have demos of all their actors. So you just start listening, right? And you can start listening to them. You can contact them through their agent, or if there's somebody you like, ping them on Twitter. Because if they're a voice actor and you say, hey, I'm working on this project, do you want to see what it looks like, right? You will probably pique their interest because they'll be like, oh, what's that about? Because we as voice actors want to work with enthusiastic people. And so that's very appealing.
My whole career, I mean, that's why I'm at the agency that I'm at, is because I had these performances that I loved from some of the people that I recommended earlier, and I looked up where they were and was able to make introductions at that agency. So everything I've done in my career and how I've become who I am came out of fandom and doing that reverse engineering of credit finding. And we're also, the other thing about voice actors is I think we're uniquely supporting of each other. We will constantly, like I said, I constantly refer actors to projects and want everyone to be the best fit, and it's true of casting directors and voice directors too. So I think there's more of that maybe.
There's a cultural difference with voice actors. You may have heard horror stories about on-camera actors being sort of cutthroat and competitive.
Yeah.
Voice actors are not like that.
Here's the thing, we're just super rad.
Yeah.
We're the best.
We're just all rad.
And we're like super nice.
Part of that is you have to be good to be a voice actor, right? You can't just fake it. You can't go on your looks. You have to be able to step up to a microphone and deliver the goods. Yeah. So any one of us who has actually done this, we respect each other because of our talent. Then on top of that, we're often not in competition with each other because we're almost like singers. We're different voice parts. So
Well,
I'm
You and I mean,
Well, I know. Don't get me started, woman. You keep sniping on my roles. So, I'm a baritone with a very low extension. I'm not going for the tenory characters that some of my friends are going for, right? And so, like, my friend Bob Bergen plays Porky Pig. If they ever called me to play Porky Pig, I'd say, what are you doing? Call Bob, right? The same way that if they call Bob and they say, we need somebody to play Superman, they'd be like, what are you doing? Call Crispin, right? And, like, we understand what we're good at, and we're happy to let someone who nails something take that job because we know there's another character that's going to be right for us.
Yeah, so the answer is Google, the internet, and then Twitter, obviously, reaching out to us on Twitter, and then asking for referrals, for recommendations.
And you can also just post auditions on sites like Actors Access and get auditions, come and listen to them. But yeah, getting a casting director or a voice director to curate for you is very helpful.
Very helpful.
I mean, seriously, if you were to ask me today who my top 5 voice directors are, I can tell you without a hesitation who I would absolutely recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So ping us on Twitter.
Right now.
Ping us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter.
So you may be wondering, how much is this going to cost, right? So let me give you just a quick
$1 million.
Right. So let me just give you a quick sort of very simple spreadsheet breakdown to give you sort of estimate of what we're talking about. Okay. So we've got the different agreement types and their scale minimums, right? That's the sort of minimum amount that you pay. We call it scale at the union for a certain session. So for a 2-hour voiceover off-camera session, that's $412.75. That's the 2-hour session. You can also do the 4-hour voiceover session or 8-hour performance capture or stunt on-camera session. That's how the standard agreement works. Is it's either a 4-hour voiceover or an 8-hour on-camera. And that's the $825.50 rate. Now, in addition to those base minimums, you have the 10% agent fee, you have 20 to 30% of taxes and withholdings, depending on how that sort of works out, and your payroll processing fees, which may vary depending on which payroll company you're using. Sometimes it's a flat fee, sometimes it's 5% of what you're doing. So all this sort of, if we roll all this together, and we have a sort of an approximate final amount for each one of these, for the 2-hour session, it would work out to about $680-ish, and for the 8-hour or 4-hour voiceover, 8-hour on-camera session, it would work out to $1,360-ish. And these are definitely ishes, right? Legal disclaimer, these numbers are only estimates. Please consult with your own financial experts for more precise totals. But that's a sort of ballpark figures that we're working with. Yes, please, Bud, go right ahead, take a picture. You got it? You got it? Good.
Yeah.
Don't want to go by until you got what you need.
Yeah.
So, if you have any questions, please reach out to the SAG-AFTRA voiceover department at their phone number, 323-549-6815, or feel free to email them over the interwebs at interactive@sagaftra.org. Operators are waiting, standing by for your order. No, seriously, I mean, it's been a big deal, both for those of us who have been on the committee, working on the interactive contract negotiations for more than 3 years, which is like shocking. But it's been vital to us to make sure that the union services developers and producers in an effective way. I know how important it is to the Katies and to the staff in the voiceover department.
We're both named Katie, and I'm the senior
Yeah.
business rep, and she is my national director. So when he says the Katies, he means that there's two people
There's two
named
Katies.
Yeah,
We
there's
have a
on staff
Katie,
of the office.
Katie Watson and Katie
talk to Katie.
Sikkema.
Yeah.
And so I know they bend over backwards to make sure that they're being communicative and clear in what's going on. The whole website at SAG-AFTRA is being updated. There's all sorts of new stuff in the works to make things simpler and faster, better online forms. You have to forgive the bureaucracy of an older union that's been around since the 30s, right? But that was especially in your field, in the video games in general, and in independent video games especially. The world is always changing, right? Technology and everything is changing at a very fast clip, and we understand that, and we're really trying our best to make sure that we can interface with all of you and be effective and helpful.
I think I want to just bring it back to the fact that this contract was made with indie developers in conjunction. Like, we worked together to make this thing accessible for everybody because we love what you guys are doing. We think it's really cool to tell great stories, right? So if there's something that maybe doesn't work for you, call Katie. Call her and say, hey, most of it's fine, but then there's this little piece that, can we maybe talk? And because it's a one project deal, we will do what we can to find a way to work it out. Like I work at SAG-AFTRA.
No, but I will.
know.
Yeah, like please call me. Tell me about your game. Tell me what you need. If there's something that doesn't quite work for you, like I can't promise I can change everything you'll need, but let's take a look at it. We'll see what we can do.
And we'll be keeping track of that feedback. And if things are cultures or business models are shifting rapidly, it's important that we know. We again, me. I also work at SAG-AFTRA.
All right.
We are close.
Oh,
We are done.
We're done. We're good.
Thank
Thank
you so
you
much,
everyone for
everybody.
coming.